right. Well, welcome everyone to the June meeting of the Casey Coalition for Digital Inclusion. We I think everybody knows me. I'm Leslie Scott. I'm the Digital Inclusion Program Manager for Casey Digital Drive. And we start every meeting with our mission and vision. So the vision is that every citizen and household in the Kansas City metropolitan area has access to the internet, the equipment needed to use it, and the skills needed to take advantage. And then our mission is to facilitate collaboration among organizations and initiatives working to bridge the digital divide in order to maximize the resources for the greatest impact. So we are still kind of in this transition period for the coalition, where we're working on getting that membership process figured out. But in the meantime, I think we have at least one new attendee. Jessica, JVS, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to attend. My name is Jessica Barzak. I am the program director at JVS, so I'm stepping in. My program manager, Lena, who's normally with you all, is out. So I'm filling in and really excited to kind of sit in on this meeting and get a better idea what our community is doing and how JVS can kind of be a part of that. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. All right, so this is our agenda for today. We're going to talk about housing and digital inclusion, and I'm excited to have some great guests here to talk about this topic. It's becoming increasingly more intertwined. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and I will let our friends at Health Forward start us off, and we will get this party started.
Do you have the slides? I don't know if I see them.
Oh, I was going to let you drive. You can
sorry.
drive. That's okay.
John, do you have those with you?
Yep.
Because I don't
Yeah,
know that I have them. Okay.
I will
That'd be great.
Yeah, I'll share them right now.
Thank you all for your patience and good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us, Leslie in Coalition. We consider ourselves old friends of the Coalition. But I think many of you are familiar with the Health Forward Foundation, but just in case, we thought we would start off with a very general overview of who we are and what we do. And if we get it to the, oh, here we go.
Can y'all see the slides?
Yes, I think we need to go up. There you go.
Okay.
Wonderful. So we're a young health foundation, conversion foundation. We were created 20 years ago from the sale of a hospital chain. And the proceeds created Health Forward Foundation. So we are excited that our purpose plan currently, we are into the fourth year of this new purpose plan. But mainly our Health Forward Foundation purpose is that every day we work to support and build inclusive, powerful, and healthy communities characterized by racial equity and economically just systems. Our mission is to achieve health equity and secure fair and just region in a fair and just region through our leadership, advocacy, and resources. We have this colorful placemat that we refer to try to ground us on how we operate. And really our North Star is race equity and economic inclusion. And we do this through 4 purpose areas, and that is platform, people, power, and place. And in in the way in which we do our work is that we try to really approach it with improving, partnering. It's not just that you all or that we are experts, we're all experts in this work. It's going to take the collective to really move the needle around economic inclusion and race equity. In the area that we refer to as power purpose, which is the middle there, actually the blue area, we're looking at building powerful communities where we have healthy people and healthy communities. This work strengthens community voice and leadership by supporting civic engagement, grassroots organizing, advocacy, and community-led movements that influence decisions affecting health and well-being. Moving along to the people purpose area, which is the middle burgundy area, it's really looking at healthy people through equitable systems of care. And this purpose area focuses on improving access to whole person health services, including physical, behavioral, oral, social care, and while supporting innovations that make community health ecosystems more inclusive and equitable. In the platform purpose, we're looking at systems, policies, and narratives that influence health outcomes. And the platform advances racial equity and economic inclusion with partnering with government entities, funders, and community leaders to shape the policies that are going to transform systems and stories and change the stories so that we are really looking at this work as asset-based. When we look at the communities of focus, we really want to ensure that we are communicated in a manner of, seeing our folks with many resources. In one sentence, when you look at this colorful placemat, it's really using our leadership, advocacy, and resources to advance health equity by strengthening people, power, place, and platform across this region, if you can go to the next slide, please, which we represent. We are, based on the sale of the hospital chain, we're focusing on 6 counties, and those 6 counties in Kansas are Allen County and Johnson, and Wyandotte, and on the Missouri side, Jackson County, Cass County, and Lafayette County, and the greater Kansas City metro, which includes part of Clay and Platte counties. Much of the work that we do, because it's by state, we understand that the only way we're going to move the needle and change systems and policies is really monitoring the work that's happening at the state level and municipality level. So we try to, in partnership with our partners that we fund as well as that we support, we look at what is happening at both states to ensure that we are engaged and are also making sure that we're supporting those policies that are going to help us move the needle. Next slide, please. I'll hand it over to John. And I forgot to introduce myself. I'm an impact strategist from the Place Purpose team at Health Forward. And we are led by Jennifer Tidwell, who's our principal of the Place Purpose team. And John Tramel is my colleague, and he will give you a little more information around our Place Purpose.
Thank you, Adriana. And it's great to be with you today, everyone. I know I've had the opportunity to share a little bit a few months ago with the coalition members, and so that was really great. Always glad to be in the space with you all. The Place Purpose team is really connected to why we're having this conversation today. Adriana explained kind of the holistic work of the foundation, and we wanted to kind of highlight Place. It's the area where Adriana and I work, and it's also most relevant to our conversation today. So our Place outcomes, we desire to increase affordable housing and home ownership opportunities because we believe and know that this is a vital aspect of improving people's health and helping them be able to have an economic mobility, to move and advance their economic abilities, and to reduce disparities in digital access and literacy. And I know we're going to get into this conversation about how these things are linked together, and I'll save that, although I'm eager to share some thoughts. But these are the two areas, and so as we talk about that today, we'll dive into those a little deeper. How do we do that, though? Just real briefly, that we're part of supporting organizations that are developing multi and single family housing, home repair programs. Obviously, not just creating more units, we also have to preserve the units that we have. As housing stock ages, and if folks struggle to have resources to make those improvements, that can lead to unstable housing, even if it's a home ownership situation. So for us, home repair is a major part of our work. Obviously, home ownership counseling and preparing people along the pipeline of being ready to become homeowners, to gain that access to the wealth that can be created by having a home, by owning a home. Down payment assistance. So many folks could sustain a house, but struggle to have the resources to get into the house at the time of purchase. And so we work with organizations to provide that. Planning and coalition building, like we're doing here today, eviction mitigation and prevention, and this is, for us, isn't just about a one-time kind of support. This is about creating a system where evictions are mitigated and prevented broadly over time, more holistically. So what that means is really supporting different strategies that address the system. So like in Kansas City, Missouri, having the right to counsel, for instance, so that people have lawyers with them when they go into these processes, because we know that without legal representation, the chances of that being a successful ending to that situation is not going to happen. And so, and then data analysis and research, which, we do a lot of that, working with different partners to kind of know what the data says so we can know how to best implement a strategy. And then when it comes to accessing the digital economy, all the things that you all do, this is your expertise, and we are partners with many organizations here today and others in our community to access affordable broadband, really making sure people have access to to high quality devices. We want to support our multilingual and multicultural communities, particularly folks that are recently immigrating to our communities, and just helping them be able to navigate their processes here to be able to have, once again, healthy and connected lives. And then, our accessing online health portals and telehealth services, because, as things advance, that is a critical way that people can get access to quality services and supports. And then workforce training advancement. Really, that's the economic mobility piece, just to move beyond the current situation and advance those opportunities. So I will stop there because I know we've taken some time. We'll pass the baton, Leslie.
All right, thank you so much. Let's see. Geoff, why don't we hear from you? And I don't know, John, if you can stop sharing, maybe.
Yep, I'm gonna do that now. Sorry. There we go.
It's okay.
Yeah. Good to see everybody. Geoff Jolly. So I serve as the executive director at LISC Greater Kansas City. I pop in and out some of the coalition meetings with a fair amount of irregularity. So I know many of you, but it's been a minute since I've been in some of these meetings. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I did not prepare a slide deck as fancy as the Health Board Foundation team. So I will keep that in mind for next time with them. But I'll just share a little bit about LISC Greater Kansas City. For those who aren't familiar, we're a national nonprofit. We're a community development financial institution. So we're celebrating our 45th anniversary this year here in the Kansas City market. It started in New York a couple of years earlier than the initial investment. But Kansas City was one of the first 10 cities where LISC kind of stood up for their work. And really the North Star for us is housing. And then ancillary to that, like what does it take to build thriving and sustainable communities of opportunity that predominantly focused, because we're a CDFI, predominantly focused in low and moderate income neighborhoods, but obviously as people move around with, that area of focus has shifted over time. Historically, we kind of had three neighborhood levels of areas of focus. So like the historic northeast part of Kansas City, Missouri, the Truth Prospect corridor in Kansas City, Missouri, and the neighborhood surrounding downtown Kansas. But like I said, over time, people have moved, and I think our thinking has also shifted from just solely a place-based strategy to saying we want to be place-based, but really people-focused. And part of that is also addressing system-level changes. And so much of our work more recently has been around how do we tackle kind of the housing ecosystem, which Adriana and John have shared quite a bit about already. But what is it going to take to get housing stability across our entire region for people? So we've got around it. You'll hear this number thrown out, that 64,000 unit shortage. And what does that mean for folks? It's actually gone up a little bit since we crunched those numbers like 3 years ago. But we created this regional housing partnership that came out of COVID response with Mid-America Regional Council, and some of you participated in that work as well. And so that partnerships work is really trying to address what we have identified as kind of the 7 elements of a thriving housing ecosystem. Some of that includes kind of connectivity, community, like public policy, financing tools, production and preservation, like friends mentioned, and other pieces. The workforce is another big piece, right? If we need to scale up the production and preservation of units, we also need to make sure we've got a workforce that's prepared and available to do that work. And so, that's been a lot of the work of our office the last couple of years. It's been around this regional housing partnership. We're going to be launching later this fall a regional housing fund with support of Health Board and many of our philanthropic and financial institution partners. A significant investment, $100 million investment into affordable housing, really using a mixed income strategy of trying to encourage what we've seen is low income housing tax credits and other things kind of concentrating poverty, and we want to deconcentrate the amount of affordable units in any one particular area, so that people have an opportunity to thrive regardless of where they live. So we don't want people to think like, oh, we only need affordable housing in certain parts of the community. Like, we need affordable housing throughout the entire region. And then that way, the folks who are making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, or particularly those who are making significantly less than that, have access to housing that's near some of their jobs. And that's part of the challenge right now is, there's very few housing units available near the core work centers. So as a CDFI, we have both a programmatic arm and a lending arm. So think like a bank with a mission of supporting affordable housing. We also do have other efforts, some small business work, some like grocery stores, some community centers, some things around housing that we believe are necessary to support in kind of thriving communities around the housing. But housing remains the North Star. So we also have a wealth building initiative, and part of that includes our digital equity work. It's been led lately by our rural team. So we have offices in 35 municipalities. So I manage the Kansas City market. And then we have a rural team that manages about partnerships in 2,500 rural counties, as well as areas like the territories like Puerto Rico. They get to go to Alaska and Hawaii. I tried to sign up for some of that work and they didn't let me. But the rural team has been leading a lot of our work. So we do some broadband navigator work, various connectivity work through some of the recent legislation and funding. I'll just say, because I know we want to get into conversation, but one of what we see is the connection between housing and kind of digital inequities that exist, or creating digital equity is that if you look at like those who live in affordable housing are much more likely, typically twice as likely as the general population, to have access to at-home based, internet services. So while a significant number of people carry a smartphone or a phone with them, when they get home, there's a huge disparity of who has access to kind of high-speed quality internet. And then obviously there's also differences amongst race, right? Like just like home ownership, you see 70% of white families, in home ownership, whereas you only have about 40% of Black families. Similar numbers, when it comes to at-home digital services, typically something like 80% of white families normally have at-home computers versus, about 55, 60% of Black and Hispanic families, So trying to close that gap for all the reasons that Adriana and John have laid out about kind of access to the digital economy. As we work on affordable housing units, one of the things we like to see is developers who put high-speed, Wi-Fi, free internet, or, in some of the multifamily units, housing authority units, things like that. So happy to answer any questions later on, and appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thanks so much, Geoff. And we're going to continue to go down the systemic funnel here, and I'm going to hand it over to Pedro.
Good morning, everyone. Geoff, thank you for the segue on all the great things that has taken place around the digital divide and how LISC is approaching it, tied into what Health Forward is doing. I think we sit kind of in a very similar position as a practitioner of what we need to do to change not only the first digital divide, but the second generation of digital divide and digital inequities that we're starting to feel today. And I'll share more about that. But my name is Pedro Zamora. I'm Executive Director for the Hispanic Economic Development Corporation. I've been here 10 years, and it's amazing how fast that's gone. I originally intended not to be here 10 years, but the pandemic kept me here as we realized what and how our cities, states were not prepared to proportionately distribute access to services during the pandemic. And here at HEDC, we have three pillars of the organization. We have community, business, and we have families that start small businesses. So that's how we look at it. The majority of our work is done with about 98% bilingual services to the Latino community. And we've pivoted over the last couple of years to include other limited English-speaking communities as well through technology. Technology's been our solution. We've been a part of the Digital Divide, KC Digital Divide, since the inception, and talked about our growth within that period of time. A talented team that I assembled, and you all know Gabriel Fumetto, a 4-minute conversation on a cold February morning. I hired him at that moment because I think it took someone like him to figure out what's happening in my crazy mind. I come from the tech space. I grew up in Kansas City. I'm serving in the community I grew up in. I've been fortunate to go to the tech space and work in the tech space from the early 90s. So seeing how technologies has manifested into the problem of the second generation divide that we're going to talk about. So HEDC is a community development corporation. Then we have the Impacto Fund, which is a CDFI lending micro lender to our small businesses. And then we have the Center for Urban Enterprise that we spun up in 2017 to help us facilitate connection to all low to moderate income individuals. We had to pivot because the Hispanic Economic Development Corporation was founded over 33 years ago, primarily to serve the Mexican community. But one chilly morning, a Peruvian person came by our office, and I had watched her from my office window for several weeks, and she did walk by and didn't come in. When I happened to get bold enough to go out and talk to her, she mentioned, "You only serve the Mexican community." And I was dumbfounded by my 1 year, 6 months as interim, and then 6 months as the executive director, that I was as guilty as anyone else that put a barrier in front of folks that were migrating to the middle of Kansas City. And it was simply an access, and it was a symbol. It was our logo. So One that I'm not too old. I can't be taught, and listen and I learn. So we changed our logo and we spun up the Center for Urban Enterprise. And today, that's you hear a lot of that from Gabriel. Our concept around the Center for Urban Enterprise is to ensure everyone has access to education. We realize you can't take education away from an individual once they learn it. You can suppress it, but you can't take it away. And throughout our last 10 years and beginning in 2018, we've created a stackable credential curriculum that was part of our ecosystem. So we've got a community development corporation that writes strategic plans that mirror what the Health Forward and with LISC are demanding and saying this is what we need to transition and make equal opportunities for all. And then we also have the CDFI fund, that microloan. Access to capital is key for everyone, but if we got to make sure the capital is correct in the right way, we deploy it. And then the Center for Urban Enterprise. But like all nonprofits, we had to pivot. We knew mid 2012, 2014, we had to change. And so we are now doing affordable housing. We got into our first project. I'm going to be honest, it's not painless. There's a lot of hurdles, a lot of pains. Be careful what you ask for. Just be careful what you ask for. But we only do it because it's an important part of what we're here for. We're here to talk about how do we get housing into the hands of communities and stabilize communities. We have to equip individuals with the power to communicate to their legislators and senators and congressmen about the right choices they're going to make, whether it's a city, state, county level. I won't beat up on Jackson County too bad in this conversation, but we experienced in 2019 how to mobilize through technology to save people from being displaced out of their homes with the regressive taxes in 2019 that Jackson County does. And we're seeing it happen in KCK today. So KCK and also the state of Kansas. So I mentioned the second generation challenge with digital inequities today. Since 2015, we've been monitoring the decline in performance of education around science, math, and reading. That's an outcome that carriers like Sprint, who I worked for, we identified that early on as a risk, but then we also looked at what the profitability in tech and what we gain in a business model decision. Unfortunately, the benefit of having everybody has access to technology has further crippled our low to moderate income community, because we have taken it to the step to where we don't use it specifically for advancing. We use it for the entertainment aspect of it. We can look at the E-rate that's currently being discussed in DC. They talk about the scoring systems and they want to decrease that funding and redirect the funding. It's business-minded decisions that we need to be focused on. We recognize that, and that's why we look at stackable credentials, but we also looked at how do we play the game with them to show that if we get the right tool in the right hand, we can move the people. I mentioned our affordable housing project that we're doing. It's designed as a 9 townhome unit project in the Census Tract 153, which is on the west side. So we now have all the things that we're going to cover basis on that the banks and LISC and Health Forward are identifying in the city of Kansas City. But who's going to build them? And when we looked at the cost of building affordable housing and the funding that we had to use to get the housing and people participating from the community, the project 9 townhomes, of the 9 trades that are used to build it, 7 are Latino, 6 came through HEDC's entrepreneurship program, 5 are from the neighborhood, and 4 all used our loan fund to build the homes, to bridge the gap so they're not robbing from previous Peter project to pay Paul's project. And so we had to give them 0 interest loans to get that. We made sure that we got enough data from them to collectively talk about the impact of moving people into affordable housing. What we learned from this experience is all that great planning goes well until you get people in there who are struggling. And we're doing it at the tail end of the pandemic, and we recognized immediately that, okay, they're trusting us with their financials. They're giving us all the information we need, but why is my project at risk right now? And what we found is that the small business owner and their employees that we're asking them to hire from the community, Section 3 workers, nothing bad about them, but it's just a form of communication. We recognize the communication breakdown between the employer, a business owner who's the smartest guy in the world in that specific trade, a limited business transaction. We recognized we were going down a pathway that we need to talk about when we're going to solve affordable housing and how we're going to use the different forms of capital to achieve affordable housing. But the capital that we used was communication capital. We spun up using the power of AI, a little application that tests the mood of the business owner, and when they walk on the job, the mood of the employee. And then we start putting in just these little, call it smoke and mirrors, if you will, but we just little samples of if they all put it on their phone, we take 1 percentage point off the business loan that we're going to issue. Everybody wants a discount, so we give them a discount. But what we gathered, and we kicked it off in July of 2025, we saw a 13% increase in performance because now people are recognized they're being tracked. They were okay with being tracked, and the mood of between the business owner and the employee, those relationships are tough. But when we showed in a mood, just a simple, like the mood ring, let's just call it the mood ring. When we showed the mood on the job was good, the plumber talked to the electrician talked to the framer talked to the HVAC installer, and we saved 13% in time. And the reason I say this is technology saved the project, but it also creates a problem, as I mentioned earlier, in the second generation of losing our communication skills, losing our access to reading, science, and math because we're stuck in the social media world. We've got our project to where we want to have, and we're talking to a couple of carrier providers, but we want to control the router that's on the site. We want to give free access to the technology, the digital world, but we want to control it. And I say that because if we're going to give it to them for free, we want to ensure that they're using it correctly. That we want to make sure that there's an equal amount of time, and we're using data that we're pulling from national reports that are threatening our federal dollars. They're saying that we're losing science, math, and reading skill sets from our young, and we can track that from 2015. We want to be able to say, let's just try to fine tune what those routers are delivering to the end user. And so that's kind of how we approach it. We know that technology, wireless technology, doesn't penetrate every brick building in the urban core. So we know that. We know we got to get. We know that the great work that the state of I'm going to say Kansas City, Missouri for sure, buried a lot of dark fiber around every major corridor that we know we can get access to. So there's a lot of knowns that we know, but now we got to get that known to in the hands of the individuals that are going to use the technology that we're saying that need it the most. But we can't go backwards in our ability to train them and educate them. So I'll stop there.
Thanks so much, Pedro. And Jessica, last but not least, I kept you at the end because you are working at the household level as well, and really excited to have you explain maybe, your most current work over the last year or so.
Sure, absolutely. Let me see here. I'll share my screen. I've got a few slides put together. Hope everybody's having a good, happy Friday, everybody.
Seeing the attendees here on this call makes it good for me. I missed a few. Looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you. Can everybody see my screen? Okay. So yeah, I'm very excited. Thank you, Leslie, for the invitation and to be joining such a wonderful panel to talk about digital inclusion and affordable housing, and particularly broadband access as well. So Phoenix Family, and I'll kind of get into some details about what we do, but these are pictures of the folks we serve. We work on very hard to work implementing a human-centered design. So everything we do, we try to look at it from the lens of the folks using the services and programs to best help and serve and engage and involve people in the process. So let me go to the next slide here. So a little bit about Phoenix Family. So what we do is we contract with the owners of affordable housing communities to provide services right on site where people live. So there are 37 housing communities where we have staff there every day, dedicated staff. So they're the same staff, get to build relationships with people, which is a huge part of our strategy to do the work that we do. Any day, over 5,700 people have access to the services we provide. Average annual income, to give a little bit more information about the needs that we might see, is about 11,500 annually that folks are able to bring in for their income. Our mission is we help people exit poverty by offering opportunity and support right where they live. So that relationship building is very important. So we get to see, the ups and the downs, and we can celebrate people's wins along the way and really walk alongside them as they're making progress to exit poverty. So we're more than housing, and we don't offer the housing. We do contract with housing providers, but we transform it to be more than housing. So we help navigate barriers and helping people gain access to opportunity through support that is close by, personal, and consistent. So being right there where people live, you get to see things from that human-centered design lens. And these are a lot of the needs that we see probably every day in all of the areas. And we were, I think, working on a presentation last week with the Children's Mercy Research Institute, Leslie and John and I think the question was asked, how many times have you accessed your phone today or accessed the internet? So just knowing that, of course, those things are needed to do any of these things, and not just access, but quality access. One of the things that I was just talking to a group of staff this morning with buses again, and there is a line out the door for physical bus passes because folks weren't prepared or didn't have access to put the app on their phone to be able to ride the bus. So we're seeing that all of the barriers to economic mobility and participating in daily life. Digital inclusion is, if you don't have that access, that is one of those compounding barriers. Absolutely. One of and to dig into that a little bit more about some things that we have learned, I guess lessons learned and considerations when you're doing programming with folks that have little access, is we've tried a variety of different programs in the affordable housing communities we serve. And it really depends, just building by building, how they're set up as far as providing access to broadband or internet. You may be able to offer a program out of one room because we can get wireless internet to work in the one room, or there might be variety of apartment buildings, and folks need to come to a community room in another building to be able to access that. And then how we've learned too is just with the rising costs, sometimes the owners can't support the cost of having that internet available for folks to use, and sometimes that goes away. Financial barriers, of course, financial barriers to being able to afford broadband and afford the quality of internet that you need to do all of your daily tasks, and really be able to, get a new job, get a better job, participate in that workforce development training. But also things like you have to have a credit card, on file to be able to have an account for internet. Things like that can also be barriers. or you can access free internet at your community, but first you have to pay the $50 connection fee that you'll get reimbursed later, but still that's a barrier. If you don't have $50, you don't have it. So some of those other nuances, besides just the monthly cost of having internet. We have a lot of folks, and I think Geoff had mentioned this, the smartphone dependence. A lot of folks that that is their only way to access the internet is through their smartphone. And if anybody's ever tried to fill out a form on their smartphone or tried to apply for a job or do anything that is going to take a little bit of time, it's pretty frustrating. And oftentimes people have data caps at the end of the month. So at the end of the month, when maybe the rent's coming up to be due as well, and they need to be able to access the internet more than ever, they don't have as much access to the internet. And of course, all of the compounding barriers, whether it's I need to have an app on my phone so I can ride the bus, to just trying to figure out, okay, how do I prioritize this for my household? So if my daughter needs to do her homework assignment, but I've got to find a new place for us to live, sometimes that homework assignment may not get done because somebody needs to use the data and needs to use the household phone to be able to find, be able to secure basic needs. So just seeing how those play out in real time. And then, of course, having access to devices, internet, digital literacy, of course, increases earning potential. I'll share a story that we had gotten some funding to help folks who had a barrier to work, basically, in areas of digital access and other areas, workforce development barriers. And somebody had gotten a new job, a work from home job, which helped with transportation for her school-aged kids so that she could have him at home during the summers and not have to find a place for him to go. So it's helping out with some of those childcare barriers as well. And she needed a computer. She did have a Chromebook, but that wasn't going to suffice for her employer. So she needed a desktop. So then we were able to access those funds to work with PCs for People to get her a desktop. And she was able to increase her job that had previously been paying $16 an hour to a $24 an hour paying job. So just seeing where that access can really directly bolster economic mobility. And then just wanted to open it up in case I'm sure I missed things, but are there other like considerations or nuances that folks are seeing play out in lives every day?
Thank you so much, Jessica. We are going to get into our questions now, and I know you all had to kind of hold off a bit so that we could discuss them as a group. If you want to stop sharing, Jessica, that would be awesome.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
There we go. I'm used to Teams.
All right. Yes. That back and forth, it hurts your brain. All right. So generally speaking, and just dive in, anyone. Generally speaking, what do you think are the connections between digital inclusion and housing? I mean, we talked a little bit about it, but just from a higher level.
John, I saw you on mute, so I figured you would answer.
Yeah, I think we have to really look twice, and I thank Jessica for the presentation there, because one of the questions, and I should know this, is what the economic threshold is when you move someone in an LMI category receiving housing vouchers, and then if we move them up economically, there's policies we have to address to change that. I think that's a big one, because we are now in a competitive wage world, and smartphone, smart TV, people can now start accessing certain things. And I mean, the world is changing pretty fast and dynamic. And I really believe the folks in the affordable housing sector are the new entry into these markets. But the risk of losing income prohibits many people from going after these opportunities. And maybe Jessica, maybe that's kind of where I'd like to hear your thoughts, and maybe Geoff and everyone else can chime in.
Yeah, absolutely. I had one more slide, but I didn't get to it, and that's okay. The Phoenix family has been here working, doing an innovative impact project called the Coalition Equity and Opportunity, and really looking at those policies preventing people from increasing their economic mobility. And you're absolutely right. Where if somebody's living at one of the communities we serve and their income increases, if 30% of their income is for rent, then their rent increases too. There are those benefit cliffs, and there's about 10 different benefits our folks often qualify for. And there are cliffs all at different times, and it's kind of hard to follow for depending on how many people are in your household. But yeah, where you're worse off for making more, for doing better, and you lose more in your benefits that you lose than you bring in your paycheck. So those are absolutely real, and they're workforce development barriers, where we've had people turn down opportunities because they are really scared of losing the ability to feed their kids if something should happen. They don't have SNAP. So absolutely, thank you for elevating that.
So my second follow-up would be then rent versus ownership to address the cliff. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a process. Yeah, it's a process. We do like Kansas City land bank and try to, when folks are ready. Most folks do have a goal of, they want to get a better job so they can get a house someday and get a home. But we know economic mobility takes time, takes a lot of times 5 years to really get somebody in that place. So one of the things that our coalition's looking to address are those benefits cliffs, and how we can bridge the gap so that people aren't negatively impacted by the cliffs. So we've looking to implement a program and gain funding for it where we can mitigate the impact of the cliff. So if somebody falls into a cliff, we can provide funding through that cliff so we can get them on the other side so that they're better equipped to purchase a home, to be able to plan and use wealth building at that point.
I've got two questions here, one for Jessica and one for Geoff. Hey, Geoff, ain't seen you in a while, buddy. Geoff, and I guess Health Forward. So Jessica, I heard the word coalition. So are you looking for partners to help you deliver the services you just shown us? Is that what your coalition is doing?
Yeah, and Phoenix Family and the coalition, but particularly Phoenix Family, we're always looking for more partners. So yeah, would love to chat with you more to see if we can get some programming out on site for our folks. Yes, thank you.
I'll reach out to you. So Geoff and Health Forward. 30-second commercial here. My dad was a general contractor. I know how to build houses. I know how to build them affordably. The issue that I'm seeing in terms of affordable housing is that most of the grants that we've seen, they have these two words that just kills affordable housing. Those two words, prevailing wage. Prevailing wage. When you add that prevailing wage to a construction budget, the GC's cost can go up to at least 44%, which prohibits a person from affording the house. And so my question is, the funding and the things that you guys are doing, Geoff, and Health Forward, are you funding projects that have construction budgets with no prevailing wage? That's my question. Make sense?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Kenneth, it's a good question. It's a real question. I mean, I will say, so this, when, we don't require prevailing wage on loans, or we don't do a lot of grant making for housing projects per se.
Yes.
On our lending, we don't require it. That being said, as you know, affordable housing typically requires a pretty complex stack of multiple sources of income. And what happens often is if they get, for example, I serve on the city's housing trust fund board. So if they get city housing trust fund, financing, then the prevailing wage may be triggered by some of that public grant dollars, which then,
Right.
to your point, it does increase the cost, which then the question becomes, is the grant worth it? Is the grant more or less than what the additional cost of the prevailing wage is? I will
Yeah.
tell you, we had a conversation with the developer, so we were in a deal where it is currently exempted from prevailing wage, but it was grandfathered in because it's been in the works for a minute. And when we talked to them about some of the recent changes that the city was adopting, they were saying it's going to add 15% to our cost. So the project was going to go from roughly a, $50 million project, to a $60 million almost project. Had they had to comply with prevailing wage. Well, that additional 10 million was not getting covered by anybody from additional public grant dollars. And so it's a real issue. I think it's one that we are still struggling with as a community to address. And I say we broadly, like, because we want to create better economic opportunities for people. We know that paying, a fair wage, a prevailing wage allows for better economic opportunity, but expecting the developer to squeeze that into an already tight pro forma budget is a hard ask. And so I agree with you. I think there's more conversation kind of required around at what point do we trigger prevailing wage? Typically, you see it in commercial industrial work, at a certain level or higher. But if you're dealing with like a single family rehab, right, it's somewhat extraordinary to be required, or below a certain threshold even. So it's a real issue. I don't know. Go forward, I have other thoughts.
Yeah, no, I would agree.
Good answer, Geoff. Good answer.
You were trying to do this on this part.
Yeah, no, I think we at Help Forward, anything we put funding into housing related development is we don't have any kind of stipulations that require anything in those kind of formal tools or requirements. That doesn't really, for us, it's really about the end user and ensuring that folks that are living in the space have a affordable, safe, and healthy place to live that meets their income, so that they're not paying more than 30% of their income on their housing and related both rent and utilities. And so for us, that's really where we want to be specific about what we want to see with the housing that is created through any funds that we contribute. As Geoff said, it's a complicated capital stack to make housing possible, development possible, and Health Forward by no means has the largest stake in those stacks. We are a pretty small contribution sometimes to what's several $1 million projects. So we definitely are careful how we operate in that partnership. What I will say just real quickly to go back to Leslie's original question is how are these things broadly connected to each other? And I want to highlight Geoff. Geoff listed several, disparities that exist racially in our society, right? Why is the wealth gap between Black individuals and households, white, Latino, Indigenous, like it is? We know those disparities exist, but we, so many times how did it get there? And, quickly, many of us have heard and talked about, and it's more of a broad conversation and more of a regular conversation around housing, that there was redlining, right? Banks chose communities to exclude from opportunity. And not just banks, but construction, realtors, the whole thing. There's a whole history there. And Black and Latino and Indigenous communities were particularly targeted or left out or excluded through our history. And so that wealth gap didn't just get created on its own. It was systemic. It was a system that led to that. And so it's important to name that. And in part, in kind of across that and digital access. That was true. There was a digital redlining that took place, right? Like these are for-profit decisions that were made that certain communities weren't worth investing in. And so, that is how these things are linked. And while we talk about the solution to health equity and to economic mobility is through affordable housing and digital equity, the reason those disparities exist in the first place and we don't have equity is because intentional decisions were made both in policy and practice at the government level, at the corporation level, to prevent all communities from having equal opportunity. So I think it's just important to name that as we start this conversation.
Ken, I'm going to add one comment to your question. So you can't make affordable housing without using all the tools in the toolbox, and that includes the various different funding mechanisms that the city, the state, and federal government may offer. But be careful what you ask for. We don't have any federal dollars in our housing project because the trigger was eight. For HUD to give us funding for the affordable housing project, the number was 8. If I'd built 8 units, I'd have stayed away from the prevailing wage challenge. So we kick that back. We don't want that money. The Housing Trust Fund, if I was to use it towards construction, prevailing wage requirements. So I'm not picking on the Housing Trust Fund, but it's a great product. We use it for down payment assistance. What we found is in our economic formulas that we have to use the tools, and we have an LCRA 10-year tax abatement. Jessica mentioned it's a 5-year plan before an individual can move economic wealth mobility upward. So we can take them at a 60% and at that level. And our goal is to try to get them to move up. So using the dollars that we have and the products and the technology to really help ensure that we can move folks. And that's why I mentioned the second generation of digital divide. It's how are we applying the new technology in our home and the people, the programs that we're serving. I mean, I mentioned that the 2015 and since 2015, we've lost almost 31 basis points in education, science, reading, and math.
And civic, throw that in there. I'm just shocked.
And civic response, civic mobility, absolutely. So we have to really rethink how this divide is. It's twofold. We don't want to get to the third generation of loss there. So we got to really rethink this.
Can I just add real quick to something John said about we think of internet access as a utility, right? So if to determine if housing cost burden, you're looking at your housing costs, typically your rent or your mortgage, plus the utility costs. In Kansas City, we see, an average of around $350 a month in utility costs. Some of that is skewed high by high water bills as a result of kind of a consent decree with the federal government. But then if you start to add internet costs into that, fold, then it goes up from there. Although there are some free programs, right, that different providers, have, depends on kind of the level of access and geographic footprint and, whether you're getting the speed you need to be competitive. The one thing I do want to add, though, we think of like digital access I think a lot of times we talk about it as like access to economic opportunity, but some of it is also like just basic like access to rent, like access to like reach your landlord. Like dating myself here, 30 years ago, I was one of the 8 Americans, 1 in 8 Americans who worked at McDonald's. I applied for that job, using a paper application at the time, right? You walked in, you handed it in, you waited for them to call you back, right? Because we used phones back then, we called. Well, today, like you have a rent, you do it all online. You can't call a landlord oftentimes to track down them to say, oh, I want to apply for, it's almost always now a portal. And, it's like, so if you don't have digital access, you're also having a hard time even just finding available units for you to apply to. You may have challenges accessing like, oh, submit your maintenance request here in our portal, and things like that. So, I mean, even to me, it's yes, economic opportunities are huge, but even some of the basic like um, you know, access to the housing unit had become online. And Kenneth mentioned civic. One of the things I think we all work with our public entities as well is you're seeing this transition to like a lot of information going online, online webinars, online, um, forums and things like that, and having to remind, some of our public bodies, like, hey, that's great, but not everybody has access to that online system. And not everybody can join a Zoom meeting to get the information. And so now you've created an information divide here by sharing it only with those that you chose to have access, or that you chose to do it online, but not, we don't see the mailers anymore. We don't see the public engagement opportunities in person that we used to have. And I understand the convenience factor for those who have access. But we have to remember that there are huge swaths of our community that don't have that access or that are limited by their broadband cap from their phone or their usage data cap, et cetera. So I just think there's some other like very technical or not very technical, but just very basic aspects of the digital economy and digital inclusion that are also connected to housing, such as rental portals.
I think if you
Geoff,
take
I
a look at
totally agree.
what Geoff mentioned on this Fair Housing Act, just think of all the violations that a landlord is violating and changing the contract. You got contract law that's being butchered up every day when they're telling you got to change based off the digital communication. Go back and read those contracts, and I think that's a policy change.
To build off on what Geoff said too, like if you think about some of those examples, so it's the end of the month and I have bills to pay and I've ran out of data on my phone and now I need to go to the library to access the internet and the computer. And it's going to cost me now $4 each way on the bus line to get there. And then when I get there, I'm going to need to wait in line for a couple hours to get on a computer. So it not only um, dollars out of my pocket to access the internet for my basic needs that are absolutely crucial, but also the tax of time that it takes to access something that we're pretty used to just being able to grab at any moment to jump online and pay a bill. So yeah, we see that play out every day.
And
Time poverty.
I can't stress enough, just building on everything Geoff and Jessica mentioned currently regarding the fact that, broadband is the fourth utility. We need it. It has to be part of your budget when folks, Health Forward is very committed to home ownership. We see that as the tool of building health and wealth. And in order to get to that, you really need to um, recognize that there is a fee to have high-speed internet, that you need to bring that into the budget. Many times we think that it's easy to get to the library to use their computers, but there's highly sensitive data that, what if you accidentally leave, that information on that computer or you print something out, which by the way, public libraries can print things out for free. I just discovered that and I'm utilizing that benefit. But yeah, I think so many times, not only do we need the devices because phones are limited, you need the laptops, you need to know the high secure, how to secure that data. You also need to recognize that when folks are in that journey of home ownership, that you have all of those steps necessary to get to home ownership require an online presence. So having folks that are walking you through the process as well as ensuring that the information you're sharing stays secure is so critical in that journey.
Hey, Leslie, I've got to run, Leslie, but I got to make one comment and I'll leave. I'll leave. I promise I'll leave. So I've been watching. Have you guys been watching these executive orders around AI? Has anybody been watching, tracking this? Okay, so at any rate, there needs to be an oversight committee. Again, you all using this chat GTP, this Copilot, this blah, blah, blah. Okay, so there are no guardrails, okay, around those LLMs, which means, in short, they're training off of you, right? But they're not telling you what they're putting in the LLMs. So I'm just saying, as a high level, at some point, there needs to be a community oversight committee for these large language models that's being introduced to our communities. You're talking about redlining. I have been doing neural networks since 1996. You guys are calling it AI machine learning. What I can do with this AI redlining is nothing. I can track what you like, post, blah blah, and segment you in a certain category, and you won't get anything very easily. So my point, Leslie, I was gonna call you, Leslie, and ask you about this. We need to do something about this. I know Leslie likes to fight with me sometimes, so let's go, Leslie. She'll duke it out. She'll help me fight this. It just needs to happen, guys. Watch, Google, whatever you want to do. These executive orders that are coming out because the federal government was about to put some guardrails around these LLMs, and three billionaires made a phone call and they made it voluntary. Okay, so I'll
Yeah,
be.
yeah. I think that's a great point, Ken, and probably a full topic for another time. So we can definitely dig into that at a future meeting. I think it's a great suggestion.
Leslie, real
Um,
quick, just real quick, I'm going to just capture on Ken and Jessica. The digital literacy that we take and deliver to people has to be used in a way to educate them on what apps they're using, because I am sensitive to everyone having access to technology, but I'm not so sensitive to say at the end of the month they can't do what they need to get done. There's enough free Wi-Fi out there, they can do it. Think smarter. If we get the right literacy to them and how to manage, I think we can circumvent some of these. We may not squash it all. The decision to let little Jimmy do his homework versus mom do the work or apply for a job. I'm not too sensitive on that. We have to have the right digital literacy set credentials going out to the individuals, because the apps that Ken is talking about are the ones that these carriers want you to do, because it's all about revenue share. It's all about revenue generation. So thank you, Leslie, for that.
yeah. Well, and I don't know if you all have been following the Pope's encyclical that he just released. If you haven't, it's really interesting, and I recommend you checking it out. And again, I think we can cover this topic in the future. I wanted to just maybe touch quickly on one more question, and um, this really is the meat and potatoes that I wanted to get into today. But what are you doing around this issue, and who are you doing it with? So, Jessica, you want to go first?
Sure. I mentioned earlier the Coalition for Equity and Opportunity, looking at a variety of systemic barriers that compound and prevent people from reaching the economic mobility that they seek. So KC Digital Drive, of course, is a partner, and I see a lot of our partners from Great Jobs KC, MERS Goodwill. I don't want to leave anybody out on that, but about 10 or 15 partners, and our engagement partners. So folks with the lived experience have that same spot at the table to plan, and not only just to figure out how to implement and mitigate the benefits cliffs, but also for systems and advocacy change, so we can influence policy to at the state level to have more, instead of sharp cliffs, have more of an off ramp, a longer off ramp, so people aren't don't have all of their benefits taken away all at once. So that is something we're looking to influence. And then a variety of partners I didn't even mention that help I mean, hundreds and hundreds of partners because Phoenix Family, we're a team of about 50 and we serve 5,700 folks every day. And we bring access to people where they live. So a variety of partners to help fill our pantries, to help provide access and digital literacy. Um, so if you'd like to learn more, we're always looking to collaborate.
Health Board, you all want to dive in?
Can you repeat the question, Leslie, to make sure I'm understanding?
Sure. What are you doing in this space and who are you doing it with?
Well, as you know, we've made investments to digital equity partners in the last 3 years, close to $2 million. And that cohort of partners are in various different, they're working with various different age groups, and some of them are going through institutions, whether it's an aging population or schools or after school programs, et cetera. But they're working with, I think, we did not overlap digital equity with housing because we know it's necessary across the board, but we are being a little more intentional that now that we have a couple years under our belt and we're learning. But currently, as far as the organization called Chess Inc., they're our main partner in financial literacy and getting folks prepared for the home ownership journey and, checking credit scores, building up their credit, et cetera. So it's important for them. And we're noticing they're partnering with many of our digital equity partners. They happen to be taking their mobile unit, or they have staff that go to those organizations and they provide that service. We also, I forgot to mention, we have a down payment assistance program that folks that go through these home ownership education programs can earn down payment assistance up to $15,000. There are many banks that we are working with that provide mortgages that also partner with Chess and us, and they provide their additional down payment assistance program. It could be 5,000 to 10,000. So you talk about capital stack for the developers. There's also a capital stack for the homeowners. And so we try to ensure that they're working with programs very much like Phoenix and others that have access to that knowledge of where to get these additional sources of funding so that their mortgage payment is reasonable, right? That it doesn't exceed 30% of their income and that they are successful homeowners. And so I think the other group I want to mention is the emerging developers of color. We understand that the housing stock is something that we need to address. And if we're not going to get to home ownership, if we don't, number one, preserve the current stock that exists, make sure that they have, healthy environments for our families to live in, but also building affordable housing. And again, we have a team of 3, but we can't do our work without LISC, without HEDC, without the Regional Housing Partnership, without the Chambers of Commerce, Black Chamber of Commerce, Heartland Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic Chamber. We partner with for-profit and nonprofit entities to ensure that this ecosystem of affordable housing is truly integrated in community and it's reaching the people that need it the most.
Great, thank you. Geoff, you've dropped a couple things in the chat. Do you want to address those?
I just threw that in the chat so folks had access to it. I mean, I'll say, we do much of our digital work is done at a national level. So, we're part of a couple of the NDIA coalition and SHLB coalition, school, hospital, library, and broadband coalition. So, I think a lot of the work is kind of at the policy, side of things. We do, though, I mentioned the rural team does manage some broadband connector programs for and so, I dropped the link for the broadband planning hub in there. We also, we have done some reports. I think at a local level, one of the unique things about this is So we've got these 35 market offices in urban centers, and then we've got these rural communities, 2,500 rural communities. So, the 35 offices, though, each office may focus a little bit like they're different. It's based on what's needed in the community, where are their gaps, where we may already have strength in a certain area. So, we've got a couple offices that lean probably more into digital inclusion efforts than we do locally here, partly because of the existence of this coalition of Digital Drive and others. Like we've kind of felt like there wasn't as much need for us to be on the front line. We are happy to kind of support those who are leading the charge here and letting, and taking a back seat. And so, we do look for opportunities to try to bring resources to the community around digital skills and digital inclusion. We did some small grants, really more earlier during COVID. But where we see it the most across our LISC offices is typically in our wealth building programs, where we've got like digital literacy programs and some intentional grant making around digital access at people's homes, skilling, stuff like that. So, but we're always looking for opportunities to support kind of the work here in the coalition work. So that won't change. But happy to talk more with folks that we specifically.
Great, thank you. And yes, Casey Digital Drive has consulted with a few LISC offices around the country around digital inclusion and broadband kind of in the earlier days of the IIJA. And so that was a lot of interesting work. Pedro, you want to wrap us up, and then we'll hopefully have a couple minutes for announcements.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie. This all starts with groups like this, so I believe we're all working in this together. We found here at HEDC that a majority of our work is done with our clients. I'd like to have, the IP stack is how we view things within our organization and how we think people move and navigate through the tasks that they do daily to either to survive, support someone else to survive, or even put strategies in place to stabilize communities. And, we're in a huge challenge. So we work with the immigrant community. I like to call them, they've been involved with the 7-layer stack their whole lives, from the Pueblo Indian mindset where they were living in caves and you moved up hierarchy. That's what we're trying to encourage them to do. Geoff had said many times civic engagement, and we teach that within our digital literacy program, civic engagement, because we know that if they may not be able to vote, but they can comment on a candidate's website or social media posting that really triggers things. People love getting a point to get triggered off of. We found good fortune working with the University of Missouri, Kansas City, KU, K-State, Stanford, University of Missouri, Columbia, all these different groups, urban planning, the tech engineers of America. We found that if we could just get the idea to them, they can plant the seed and run with it. They're going to be the future for us. We can't fight and lobby every day. We don't have the time. It's not in our mission charter, but we get good friends like Congressman Cleaver that we can talk to and just ask them to move. So there's a lot of work in there, but to narrow it down, in order to have good digital performance and outcomes, the parents have to be a part of the family's digital world. And that's what we really advocate through what we're doing. Our housing product, we had to use everybody in the alphabet soup to create a capital stack and also to get the tax incentives, because the tax incentives will ensure in home ownership and even in home rentership that you preserve a base that we can start from. And if everything else goes haywire, that base is there. And if we allow the base to grow faster than our COLA opportunities, if we have that opportunity at our jobs, then we're out of calibration. And so we just try to keep in mind and think like the big developers to come in to preserve housing, but it's more importantly to have upward mobility opportunities opportunities. And so our partnership is big, and it starts with you guys, Leslie.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, thank you all for a really interesting and rich conversation. I think that there's just so much to dig in this topic, and we just didn't have probably enough time to cover it all. But I think it was a great start. I wondered if anyone at the moment has any announcements for our community.
I had a suggestion.
Yeah.
I attended Mark Alfred convening with the Missouri Kansas Regional Real Estate Owners Association. I might be butchering the title. Sitting in that meeting, knowing that where Mark Alfred sits, and I'm not talking politics, I'm saying where he sits in his vision. By the time he left there was a lot of, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So don't assume that the politicians know they have the right answer. Guys, just keep on doing what you do and keep telling everybody one or two elevator pitches that will make a difference for everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Pedro. I know I've done some volunteer advocacy work, and we always went to both sides of the aisle because you honestly don't ever know when something's going to land with someone. And I think although it's been drastically cut lately, but PEPFAR, was George W. Bush started that to try and combat AIDS and primarily in sub-Saharan Africa. So you just never know, right? Okay. Any other comments before I ask my parting question? Right. So as a reminder, we will not meet the first Friday of July. We will meet on July 10th. So July 3rd is when most of us are commemorating July 4th. And so we moved it a week. So just that should be on your calendar. So July 10th is our next meeting. I am currently looking for suggestions for topics for that meeting. So if anyone has one, either they want to throw out now, throw in the chat, or email me later. We have 6 minutes. And if anybody has one, bye-bye, Jessica. Thank you.
I got one off the top of my head. I'm on a committee with the North American Innovative Workforce Alliance.
Okay.
This is picking up a fast pace, and we're talking about access and inclusion. Right now, they're thinking about the big attracting high caliber talent. I keep advocating, what about the talent that's here? How do we move them up the ladder? I think we should be talking about our strategies around the workforce inclusion opportunities. I think we should look at, and unfortunately Jessica dropped off. I'd like to hear her perspective on how to get it, because right now I think our LMI is being left behind in this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think especially, kind of going back to Ken's AI point, one thing that I worry about, and it might take a while, but getting your CDL was like the big push, right? And then, but what happens when we have all these self-driving trucks that we don't need truck drivers anymore, right? So that might be a while down the line, but that's one thing I worry about. Brandy, what are your thoughts?
Hi, to Pedro's point, forgive me for having my camera on. I didn't realize that you were watching me have breakfast. My apologies. It's a little bit of an announcement, and it's not the greatest of news. Great Jobs KC has recently removed IT courses from offerings simply because the employer opportunities have not been there. So, the whole idea is that you want to have a certificate, a credential that can be obtained within less than a year that's going to lead you to a good job, and employers are still insisting on college for some of those IT jobs. So if anyone has influence with employers and can help us better understand what credentials can really get people jobs in that IT space, that's something that I think this coalition is a good place to start. But that's just something that you probably all should know that's happening.
Well, thank you for that news, and I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm not necessarily surprised by the lack of employers. I know that the Casey Tech Council has been working on that in their own collective impact project that was the planning grant that was funded by Kaufman and that Phoenix Family also has been doing. So, I worked in this space at the Full Employment Council and heard this years ago. And, I think that the disconnect, between the messaging, like, oh, you can go to a boot camp, or you can go to, wherever and get, trained, and you don't need a degree. Maybe that's true on the coast, but in the more conservative Midwest, that hasn't been the case quite yet. And
And that's the risk of being involved in false advertising. We don't want to do that. So
yeah, and I think it's unfortunate because it is a lot harder, to just have the skill set, and college is not for me. I just want to learn the technology and get into a job, and so there we are. Okay. Any other ideas or thoughts about future topics for our meetings?
I have
Ken.
one. I'll put one in the chat. So I mentioned this AI executive order mainly because if your AI compliance or your structure doesn't satisfy this AI executive order and you receive federal funding, they can call back your money. That's what's happening at the state of Missouri right now. There's $900 million on the table, right, because of their AI position right now. So there needs to be some sort of discussion, how the nonprofits and the foundations, anybody that's funding, these nonprofits, is your AI in compliance with the federal government? Is it? So I need to discussions around there because they're serious, Geoff. I've been watching it for 2 years now, but what happened last week, I've never seen that before. Somebody got a phone call from 3 billionaires and changed a requirement to voluntary.
You've never seen that, but come on now.
Fly, Leslie. I'll fly. We'll do that. I'll fly. Yeah, so that's what I'm talking. So now there is things that if you are using ChatGTP, Copilot, or whatever you're using in your organization, if it's not compliant with the federal government and you're getting funding at any time, they can ask for an audit. If it's not compliant, they're going to call back your money.
All right. Well, we're right at noon, and I appreciate everyone, throwing out some thoughts here in the last few minutes. Thank you again for being here, and to all our panelists for their insights today. And we will see you on July 10th.
Be safe.
Bye, all.
Again.